looking out her window one morning.
Well, I'm talking about when we bought the 8 acres across the canyon.
Oh, that, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good story too. It might be a good place to start.
That was Dave Bonner was,
Because, well,
you guys are rolling.
are we rolling? Okay. So how did this get started?
well, we had a guy from Canada down here as our Sunday school superintendent, and he got married here, and his real love was Sunday school. And so he was a milkman, and he did this hill up here, Columbia Heights, and he saw all these kids, and he made arrangements to rent a hall down the street from here, and we had started Sunday school in October of 1957.
Now, you guys were actually going to church at Kelso.
Eloise and I were youth pastors down there at that time. We had a pretty good sized youth group going, and we didn't want to come up here, and Lindsay talked us into it. He said, we said, well, we'll give you a year to get it started. Well, we're still here, and he left and moved to Winlock years later.
And you're still here.
And we're still here.
And then it in about a year, doing the Sunday school at the community hall, you had a pretty good gathering of people, didn't you, at that time?
Yes, we did, yes. And we would usually, after Sunday school, pack everybody that went to Kelso in our cars and go back down there and catch the morning service. That's what we did, and that's why one time we left one of our sons here. Our son, 3-year-old, I think he was.
Was it Randy?
Yeah, Randy. We got all the way down there and said, we had a car full of kids.
Yeah.
We packed people everywhere. And so I jumped them off and raced back up here, and everybody was gone. Nobody was here but the, what's his name, had picked up the Randy brought him down. So he was, and so we said, what, did you see it? He said, yeah. He said, I saw the smoke.
From the car?
Yeah, exhaust. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah, and then after you had, 80 people coming or whatever it was, you decided to form a church.
Yes.
And buy some property.
We had permission from the pastors in the area to do that, to start a church. We had to go through a certain assemblies had a setup, and so we had to get permission. And Burton Pierce was the pastor of Kelso Assembly then, and he was really a decent guy, and he was all for it. He said, you guys can get started. And so that's when we started having Sunday morning and Sunday night services.
Yeah. So in a way, we were a church plant from Kelso First Assembly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
In fact, just a little sideline there, when we opened our first sanctuary in 1961, Kelso Assembly bought all our chairs.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that first bit of land that we built the first church on, didn't that come about in a prayer meeting or something, or?
Well, as I recall, Maureen Amajo Hooper lived right across the street here, and she was looking out the window one day, and she just sort of saw a vision of a church in there. It was all this woods out here, and she felt that God was going to give that to us. So she talked to us, and then Pastor Mitchell got started on it and went down and talked to the people. There's an elderly couple owned all this land up here, and so they agreed to sell us an acre. So that was our first church.
First church building. Wow, that's pretty neat.
And then after we were in here we finally got the church built in 61 and had our services started. We expanded so much we bought another acre from them. And the only way we got that was that Pastor Mitchell, they said they didn't want to sell anymore. But he went down to Portland, picked that elderly couple up, and brought them up here. And when they saw our little church sitting here among the trees, they said, we'll sell you another acre. That's how we got the 2 acres.
So we start out, now we have how much, like 28 acres around here?
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
That's pretty good. Okay.
Yeah.
And the church grew pretty quick, didn't it?
Yes, it did. We were full. We had Shortly after we got started in there, we had an evangelist come for 2 weeks, and his name was Wingo. I don't remember his first name, but his name was Wingo, and he was so excited. He was nervous. That was his first, but we were the ones who were excited, and we were praising the Lord and worshiping. Before that 2 weeks over, that guy was preaching like a house of fire because he had such an audience for him there.
That's pretty cool.
And then a little bit later on, another couple of years more, we had a woman named Fuchsia Parrish come, and she was here 8 weeks. We had services 6 days a week while she was here.
Wow.
She was a dynamite.
Yeah.
We were packed out all the time.
So that was it 65 then that we built the second sanctuary?
Yes.
Yeah.
We built. Actually, in 65, we built the first level out there that you can see in that picture.
Yeah.
And we had put a roof on it.
Okay.
And had Sunday school, and we had a big, what do you call it, a hall for everybody, fellowship hall down there and everything. Well, inside of a year, we built the next 66, we built the church that's in there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So things continued to progress. And Pastor Mitchell, he left us in what, 69 or 70?
71.
71. Okay.
He was here 11 years. Man, I need some water.
Yeah. You know, he really laid the foundation of worship and praise in our church, didn't he?
Yes, that was his real thing, was praise. We'd always at church had pretty much been 3 hymns and a prayer, and then turn it over to the pastor. And he just said, we haven't worshiped yet. And so he stood there with his hands in the air, and that's when we became a worshiping church.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yes, and then along came Pastor Miner, and things took off again, didn't they?
Pastor Miner, we had our sanctuary there, included where the gym or fellowship hall is now, and we had a balcony there, and that thing was soon packed out. We had trouble, and so within 5 years we started building this area where we're in now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was that was opened up in 96, I think.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you.
You betcha.
A lot of pretty exciting things happened during those years. We had an influx of people from the Jesus movement, the Jesus people movement, some hippies in the church, but they were just great additions to the church.
They were, when we first, and those were the days where we wore suits and ties and everything, and here came these 2 couples in wearing coveralls and long hair and
beads and
everything. And I thought, they really don't belong here, you know. And I kind of resented them, and God convicted me of that so much that I had to get up in front of the church and confess it and apologize to those couples. And they became some of our closest friends, actually, the Goldens and the Curtises. In fact, Charlie Golden ended up being the head of UPS in all of King County years later, so that tells you how short-sighted I was.
Yeah, and then the church continued. We were packed out for quite a while, and I'm trying to think of what year it was that we bought the property across the canyon, which was...
I don't remember that year, but I do remember us looking at it, and I knew the guy that had the lease on it. So we went down and talked to him, and he said that we could, if we would buy him out, then we still had to buy it from Lennon, was the people that owned the whole thing, and we still had to deal with him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did. We ended up buying that acreage in 2 parcels, first to buy out his option and then buy the owner's. So.
And that was like 160,000 or something?
I think it was 100,000.
And that was late, 100,000 total, and that was the late 70s, I think. And the unique thing about that is that there was a canyon across
Yes.
Between us, and that's where we didn't have access. We bought property, if I remember the story right, there it was going to cost $100,000 to put a bridge across there, or 70 or 80,000 to put fill in there. So, which was a lot of money back in the late 70s. But interestingly enough, and God has everything planned out. The county replaced about 3 miles of road up here, and asked if they could to put all the. I think they took the road bed down 4 or 5 feet, so they needed a place to dump all that. And we put a culvert in, and they actually got us access, put enough fill in to have a road across to that property.
Yes.
So
Settled that problem in a hurry.
Yeah, and it really didn't. I think it cost us a couple $1,000 to put a culvert in or something. That was it.
Probably, yeah. I don't remember exactly.
So that opened up the land where now we have the salvage yard, the field, and
actually the salvage yard came from there was 3 houses just north of us here, and the middle house was shaped, had land shaped like a T, and so we bought the 2 acres behind that house, and that's where the salvage yard is.
Kind of completed that area up there.
Squared that off that way. Yeah.
That's pretty neat. It's pretty cool. So, yeah, and then Pastor Miner was here till about 87. Was it 87? And Gary Limber took over in 87. Yeah. Because he was pastor for 10 years.
Dave was senior pastor for 15 years here, and then Gary, who had been youth pastor and associate pastor, became the lead pastor, and he was here another 11 years after that.
Yeah, and some great things were happening. I think we had 30-some home groups at one time, and just the church continued to flourish, and God's been just blessing us this whole time.
Now, just to step back a second, how we got Dave Miner here was Pastor Mitchell, our first pastor's wife, Ruth, had a brother who was the general superintendent of Assemblies of God in Canada.
Yeah.
He had been out here and visited us a couple times, and he wrote a letter to the board and said, there was a guy back here in Ontario that I think would fit your church. And that's how we got Pastor Miner out here.
Wow.
When he came, it was unanimous when he came that he would be the pastor.
Yeah, that's really.
And we'd had several people here in that summer, different tribes.
Yes, I remember that.
Checking out as pastor.
In fact, I remember one guy came and said he wanted to try out again because the Lord told him this was his church.
Yeah.
But he got voted down twice. Anyway. Some good years. We had some great years around here, and then in 97, Pastor Kevin Weaver came.
Yes.
And continued to lead us, and he was here for 4 years. A lot happened during those 4 years, though.
Yes, that's when we first started making missions trips.
Missions trips, yeah.
We had we went overseas with workforces.
Yeah. And Panama, I remember that first trip.
That was our first one, yeah. That was in 98, I think.
Yeah.
1998, and then 99 we went to Honduras.
Yeah.
And in 2000 we went to New York City and rebuilt a church in the inner city Bronx.
Right.
And from then on we were all over. We were in Honduras 3 times.
Yeah.
And Argentina 3 times.
Yeah.
And Venezuela, and I don't know where. There's a lot of different places we went to.
Was.
And Spain was the last one we did that I went to anyway. Yeah.
We've been to Cambodia a couple times since then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Some great seasons we had there during those years.
That would give us a worldwide outreach.
Yeah. And a couple of significant things too. I think when Pastor Kevin was there, he hired a youth pastor named Eric Robbins.
Yes.
And he came to, I was the associate at that time, and he came into my office one day and said he wanted to use our bus garage as the new youth center.
Yeah.
And I thought he was crazy. And but he took that and he pulled the vans out, and they put plastic all around black plastic all around the walls, and speakers and car parts, and it was just, and the kids loved it. Yes. And so every week he'd have to pull the vans out and get it ready, set it up. But I think they had 125 kids coming at one time. It was just so he called it the salvage yard, and his whole thought behind that was that we were salvaging a generation that other people left for junk.
Right.
And so that started that. And then in 2005, I believe, we built the salvage yard building across the canyon on our field over there. So that's kind of how that all progressed. And that building's been a great building for us for a long time.
A nice story about that too is that the money for that, the church got an offer from a guy who knew some of our people here, and he was one of those .com millionaires, and he put $125,000. I think
it was 100.
Huh?
I think it was 100.
100,000 in the bank here, and every time we matched that, we got to draw on that. And so that's how we built the salvage yard, free and clear.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting when you can tell people if you give $100, that turns into 200. So that really is a good incentive for people to really get behind it. But the church has always been behind the youth ministry here.
Yes.
From the time back in early 70s when Jerry Wilson became our first youth pastor, and then Pastor Lindbergh, and then myself, and Mike Howard for a while, and Nathan Grandel for a while, and then Eric Robbins, and then Josh McCann, who is our senior leader now. Right. So it's been pretty exciting to see how the church has really gotten behind. In fact, you have a story about the first youth pastor, don't you? That people didn't think we could afford a youth pastor back in 71, I think.
Yeah, that was when Dave Meyer came, and he wanted to bring his youth minister out here with him, and the board at that time said we couldn't afford it. We were having a business meeting, and in that meeting, different ones stood up and said, I'll donate $200 or whatever it was.
A month, I think, or something like that. You pledged like $100 a month to pay his salary or something.
Yeah, and then we paid. The big hitch then was we didn't have the money to fly him out here, and we raised that in that business meeting, and so that's how we got him out here.
Yeah, and he was my first youth pastor.
And he was good too.
He was really a good man. Yeah. We just had a lot of fun with him. So it was great times, great years. Then Gary Lindbergh was our youth pastor. That was great times too. So
I think that was one that, once again, that Lindsay heard about. He was in Kamloops, BC at that time, and that's where Lindsay's wife had been on staff at her years before, and so they had a connection there, and that's how we got Gary down here.
That's very, very cool. So so when Pastor Kevin left in 2004, I was elected senior pastor, and so I did that for 15 years.
Something like
2004 to 13 years. So and we did a bunch of missions trips during that, and started to Celebrate Recovery. We had 100 and some people every Friday night up here, and then they would come to church. They added a lot of enthusiasm. The ones that were just really meeting the Lord and depending on Him to break their addictions and their issues, and they loved to come to church and worship, and that was a lot of fun to have them, and just some great things. We paid off our debt, paid off about $750,000 in debt during that season, which was a big thing for the church, and so we had a lot of fun. And then 2017, I felt like it was time that I step out, and Pastor Josh McCann came in, and he'd actually gotten saved here, I think around 2000, and was helping Eric Robbins as our youth pastor. And then when he left, Pastor Willard Martell called. I think Josh was up at college at Northwest University, and he called him and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come back and be our youth pastor." And so that was a great addition. Josh is just a real great kid, and he's not a kid anymore, but just a real enthusiastic about the Lord, a great preacher, great leader. And so he took over in 2005. We completely remodeled our sanctuary, kind of turned it around, and a lot of young families are coming to the church again. It reminds me of the 80s when my wife and I, Pam, were we had kids, and we had just a bunch of young couples with kids. And so it kind of reminds me that era is happening again. We're just God's just doing some great things in the church, and and we've added a great music leader too. Luke Knoll and his wife Jessie, they're just doing a great job.
Yes,
and
we kind of like them too.
Yes, we do. And I can't forget Levi Sturgeon. He came. He was the youth pastor after Pastor Josh. And Levi's just did a great job with our youth, and now he's the senior associate. He's working with the kids ministry actually right now. And he and Alyssa were a great addition to the church as well. So God's got us situated, I think, right now in just a really incredible spot, and things are going good. We're so excited about the future, and we can hope you live another 25 years so you can be a part. You can see what God does during that season.
Yeah, right. Well, we're just thankful that we're able to be here through all of that, and God has just been so good with us as far as pastors are concerned. I think we've every pastor we've had, we've loved and wanted here and stood behind, and that's part of the thing. And another thing I like about our church is we've always had almost from the first years, a good mix of kids, young adults, and older people. And I remember when we started this, we were all in our 20s and early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and so when the first guy came and was 50 years old, we thought he was old, of course. And we loved that. We loved that. And then we found an old guy, Brother Dunaway, downtown, and people would bring him up, and he just loved our church, and we loved him.
Yeah.
I mean, because we were finally getting a balance, and I think we still have that balance.
Yeah.
Although there's a good share of the people have passed on,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important. We need kids. They bring life.
They do.
Life.
They really do.
Young adults who have the energy and the heart and have the kids, and then we need the older generation to still be there, be around.
Yeah. So
we know we won't all be here forever.
Yeah, that's true. But let's hope not.
Well, so it's been a good. I think it's been. We often say, the wife and I, that Eloise and I say that we have no complaints.
Yeah.
We love the fact where we're at now, and we're still able to see all of this go on. We now have grandkids in the church, son, grandkids, and great grandkids.
That's pretty cool.
And we have 25 great grandkids now, and they keep us going.
Yeah, so that's true. When you think about that start in, was it 57?
Yeah.
1957, really starting out with nothing. You just had a few people that wanted to reach out to kids up here and rented that community hall, had prayer meetings weekly, went around to the neighbors, invited them in. And in 65 years, we own now 28 acres. We have, I don't know how many thousand square feet of buildings, probably 100,000 square feet of all of our buildings. Yeah. And just a lot of resources. And I think that's one thing about this place. If you would have done a demographic study back, in the early 60s to find out where to build a church, you would never build it up here on the hill.
That's right.
We don't have a lot of curb appeal. Not a lot of people go by here. But people listening to God, taking each step that He led them in during the last 65 years has given us a tremendous base here. And I believe that there's a destiny on this church to be large because God's given us large resources.
Yes.
We have 15 acres across our hill here that if we ever could build, we'd look right down on the whole city. Yeah. City would see us. We'd be a light. And I'm believing someday, I may not see it, but I believe someday it's going to happen. But anyway, God has just blessed this place. It's just been a real privilege to grow up in it and be a part of what God is doing in and through this assembly. And I'm just so thankful I've been able to be privileged to be a part of it.
And we're proud of you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Was I like a year old when this started?
2 years, I think.
Yeah, okay.
We have a picture of you out there with your mother and her friend, I'm a Joe, from across the street. We're shoveling sand, filling that hole in there, and you grabbed a shovel and going.
I had a little tiny shovel.
That's all 8mm, old 8mm films.
Yeah. The good old days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great days ahead too, though.
And then there's a song, a hippie song that I think that's right, and that went, these are the good old days. So that's what I feel right now.
Yeah,
you know?
you bet.
Where you're at are the good old days.
Yeah.